Figure 7.21, InitArray.java. In this example, since we're in the lesson that covers arrays, we thought we would show you how to use the command line arguments to main, which come into main as an array of strings. So once again, we'll revisit the main method here, and you can see our parameter string array called args, and recall that these square brackets can be placed either immediately following the type or immediately following the parameter name. In either case, we're dealing with a one-dimensional array of strings. Now, in this particular example, I'm going to require you to provide me with 3 command line arguments. We're going to use those arguments to help us initialize a one-dimensional array. The first argument will tell me how many elements you would like in the array. The second command line argument will represent the initial value for the first element of the array. And the third command line argument is going to represent the increment that we will add to each element to determine the next element's value. So for example, if you say you want a 10 element array with a starting value of 1 and an increment of 1, then you'll wind up with an array containing the values from 1 to 10. If you had said you wanted an increment of 2, then you'll get values 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, etc. So let's run this program to show you how it works first, and then we'll come back and look at what we do with the command line arguments. Now, if you're using a tool like NetBeans, you may need to supply your command line arguments using some of the menu options and configuration options of the environment. Depending on your development tool, you will either have to configure the tool to allow you to supply the command line arguments, or you will be able to supply them as you run the program. In NetBeans, the way it works is as follows. You go to your project's name in the projects window and right-click the project, then select Properties. After doing that, you get the Project Properties dialog, and in the Run properties, you'll see that there's an arguments value here, and this is where you can supply the command line arguments. So let's say we want an array of 10 elements. We'll start those values at 2 and we'll increment by 2 every time. So we'll click OK to supply the command line arguments, and now when we run the project, it's automatically going to pick up the command line arguments we specified, and you can see here that I got a 10 element array where the first value was 2 and each subsequent value was incremented by 2, producing the even integers from 2 through 20. If I go and do this again, let's say we wanted to produce a different range of values, so we go back to our run options once again. Let's say we'd like a 5 element array and we want to start at 1 and increment by 3 every time. Now when we go ahead and run, we get a 5 element array starting at 1, and each subsequent element is 3 higher than the previous. So you can see how we're using the command line arguments. Now let's actually show you the processing. Now, because these command line arguments come in as strings, you'll often need to convert them to other data types. So first of all, as we enter the else part of our if-else statement, this would indicate that we've got the proper number of command line arguments. And you can see here in line 16 that we're obtaining the value of args sub 0. Now here is a key difference between Java and some other programming languages that also allow you to manipulate command line arguments. In Java, the first command line argument is what you supply after the program name. So if I were to go to a command prompt, in fact let's do that right now. If I go to a command prompt and I switch to my example 21 directory here, here's my initArray example, and I'm going to do a javac star.java to compile it, and I'm going to run this program from the command prompt. Normally this is what I would type to run the program. The command line arguments start immediately following the class name that contains main. So if I want to do a 10 element array starting at the value of 1 and increment by 2 each time, when I hit enter, element 0 of the array is the value 10, element 1 is the value 1, and element 2 in this case is the value 2. So with that in mind, when we say arg sub 0 here, we're talking about the value that specifies how many elements are going to be in the array. And that is a string value which I'm then converting to an integer value, an int value in particular, using the integer class's static parseInt method. Now the parseInt method, the way it works is it expects this string that you supply it as an argument to be in proper format to be converted to an int value, which basically means it contains only digits and no punctuation of any kind other than possibly a minus sign if it's a negative number, or a plus sign if you wanted to use that to represent a positive number. But in this case, what we're doing is converting that string to an integer, storing it in the array length variable, and then we use that array length variable in the next statement to create the array object dynamically with the proper number of elements. The next thing we do is grab the next command line argument, arg_1, and we convert it using integer.parseInt to an int value and store it in the initial value variable. And then we grab arg_2, convert it to an int, and store it in the increment variable. And at lines 24 and 25, we initialize the elements of our array using the initializer value that we specified for initial value and the increment that we specified for increment. So we loop through all the elements of the array, and for each individual element we assign it the value of initial value plus the increment times the counter, and that calculates all the values one at a time. Then we have some basic looping and a couple of headers to show you the contents of the array that we just initialized. So again, the key thing here is the use of the command line arguments arg_0, arg_1, arg_2, and specifically you must remember that the first command line argument in Java is not the application name the way it is in some other programming languages. It's the first value that appears in the command line after the application name. And separately, if there are no command line arguments, then what you actually receive here in main is an array of 0 length. So you can still use args.length and see that in fact the array has 0 length if that's something that's of interest to you.
Looking to advance your career by acquiring new skills? Tired of expensive off-site training programs? Wish you could learn from the best instructors in the industry? Look no further than live lessons. Self-paced, personal video instruction by the world's leading technology publishers. Each live lesson comes with a DVD featuring 3 to 4 hours of instructor-led classroom training, sample program code that allows you to work along with your personal instructor, and an example-rich study guide. Live lessons allow you to watch the entire course from start to finish, or navigate directly to any of the individual lessons. You'll literally watch over the shoulder of your instructor as he shows you how to build state-of-the-art applications. Live lessons, the power of the world's leading technology experts at your fingertips. To learn more, visit mylivelessons.com today.